and the right frequencies programmed in, so you can get up and running and get that connection if you need 3D. One down the bottom is just showing you what your current bucket is selected. So on some machine types, you can come in here and change that. On next-gen excavators, you do that in the bottom monitor, but we'll get into some of those details later on. Across here, we have the system status. So with the system status for each, this is a traffic light system essentially to show you what is connected, what's working on the machine, if there's any errors or something still loading up. So one thing I'll point out here, it's normal to see things like the radio or your modem taking a little longer to boot up in the morning compared to other components. So if you're seeing a question mark or a caution symbol, just give that component a couple of minutes and it'll come back online. If not, that's when we'd probably engage with the dealers, and you can click on these items here to do a little bit more troubleshooting to make sure it's connected and what that's working on.
So would it be fair to say that we need to give it a couple of minutes, a bit like our PC simulator? Would it be fair to say that, Chris?
I think it would, given this morning's computer performance for each, exactly.
Nothing like having a current and up-to-date software on your PC, so your software works fantastic. So I can see your over job setup and licenses there. Just give us a little brief update on those two.
Yeah, so license isn't one that you interact with too much. It's basically saying, what do you have enabled on your machine? So if you had a 2D advanced machine from the factory and it's upgraded, this will show you where those licenses are. If you've bought a 3D machine from your Caterpillar dealership, this will come with all the licenses enabled that you need. You'll notice here we get some questions, what's this software maintenance until 2023? We're actually updating the software for this system every quarter. So when you buy that machine for the next 5 years, you've got those software updates that you can put on your machine. So that's what we see in licenses. The other one we have here is the job setup, which we'll get into, and this is where you choose, hey, are we using a design from the office? What project are we on? What options do we have here with looking at multiple designs? Are we using 3D lines? We'll get into some of that later on for each to show you how to choose a design.
Fantastic. So one of the things I noticed in your machine setup was units. So give us an example of how we can how we can actually go in and change some of those parameters.
Yeah, sure, Fleech. So here down the bottom, we have what we call a work settings menu. So within this work settings menu, this gives us the ability to come in and customize this so you're comfortable for the operator. So by default, when you get the machine, the dealers do a really good job going through pre-delivery and setting these to what are default values. But if you had an operator that wanted to work in degrees, or they wanted to work in rise over run for their mainfall, this is where you can come in and change some of those settings there.
Fantastic. What about some of the other settings that we can actually change in there, Chris? I think we've got text ribbons we can go through. We've got some screen views, iQuery. Why don't you run through a couple of those?
I will. So what I'll do for each, once we open this little start bar here, that's actually going to open up on the main dashboard where we see the machine on the display where we go to work. But before we get into that, we're going to go through some of the things that we can see in this work settings menu. So again, one of the first things is the screen view. So I'm just using my mouse to sort of show that 3D view of the job site here. And I can zoom in and out. Again, if this was the real display being a touch screen, I can just use my fingers like I can on a smartphone to zoom in and zoom out to get that view that I want. I'll show you how to change those today through the system settings menu. So within the system setting menu, down here we can get into the screen views. So where I have this layout, I can come in. At the moment, we've got that on 3. If I wanted to change that to a more simple 2 view or to 1, that's where I'd go in and do that layout. So I'm going to leave that on 2 now for each. Some of the other ones we have in there, which operators might like, is the sound. So if you're in an environment where you might have a lot of sunlight in the cab, or you're just doing underwater excavation where you're not paying as much attention to that display, you can set up audible alarms. So if you say, I want to know when I'm below grade on that design, you can turn on the alarm and also set the volume for that so you get notified without having to look at the screen. One of the other important ones we like to set up is the text ribbon here. So you can see I've got quite a number of different options of what I can have for this text ribbon. So to change these or make an edit, I can just push and hold with my finger. This opens up this display with all the different things that I could add to that text ribbon. Being a 3D machine, one of the ones we really like to make sure we've got selected is these positioning. So we've got our northing, our easting, elevation. This is really important, which we'll get into later, if you need to check accuracy on the job site. So if someone comes up with a rover, or you're putting this machine on that survey peg when you start the job, you can check that you're accurate. We've also got our vertical and horizontal position here, so we can see what accuracy you're getting from your correction source. A number of satellites, which is important if you're working near trees or near buildings in the city. Depends where you are, you can sort of have a varying number of satellites at any time through the day. So good to keep an idea on that one. So once we've set those there, and we can customize the view, I'll just select done, and that'll close that down. And then we can start looking at other items on the screen. Give that a second.
That's fantastic. So I should just add that this simulator is actually available for our customers. It is available for our dealers as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out to your dealer people if you actually would like access to this. I know that Chris has helped set up this particular simulator with some customers before in Australia. See, Chris, you're pressing some buttons there, mate. What is she stalling a bit, is she?
I think my computer's having a bad day. Might have stage fright this morning, Philip. So it's just locking up a little bit on me. It looks like we're back in business now. Just give it a second.
Let's let it just catch up, Chris. I just want to ask a couple of questions and perhaps let your simulator catch up. You don't actually need to open up each of those icons, but in the actual yellow work bar up the top, we have a number of icons. Do you want to just give us a brief explanation of what they are, please?
Yeah, no trouble. So this cat grade, pressing that takes us back to that home dashboard view. So a lot of the time people go, how do I get back to that start? How do I get back to that main screen view? Hitting that cat grade will take us right back there, which we do shortly. But the other one here is like a little...
pressing that is going to take us back to the 4 tiles.
Yes, correct. Right. That's exactly right. The other one we have here for each is like a message or an inbox. Mm-hmm. So if someone is remoting into your machine for troubleshooting, so say you've got this connected to the connected community and someone's changing your base station remotely, it might pop up with a message saying maintenance lockout active. So that'll mean that someone's in the web interface making some settings on your machine just to give you notification. The other one is this a little alarm bell symbol. So if you're, again, working near trees, and you have a poor satellite count and your precision tolerance goes out of range, it might flash up with a message on the screen saying low accuracy GNSS. This is where that message hides. So if you missed that, you said, what was that message that popped up? You can come back here and have a look at that message. But the other one here is the operator settings. So any of these settings that we're changing and setting up today, you can save that per operator. So by default, we have this as a generic, you log in and away you go with your settings. However, if you have multiple operators in this machine, you might like to say, oh, Felice has different settings to what I do, and then we can go from there.
Nothing like Caterpillar security coming up on your screen when we're running live. Chris, love it, love it. So I want to ask a question about the operator icon, because I get this all the time and I'm sure you get it all the time. If you set up your 3-4 different operators in your standard next-gen monitor, is that going to reflect into the cat grade with 3D up there for this operator icon? Is it going to be the same or is it going to be different? Different
for each. So what we find, some of the machine profile settings are different to what we have in this top 3D grade display. So they're not actually linked. So if you log in as Frank down on that bottom screen, it won't actually relate to that top screen. So 2 separate systems there, but very good question.
Frank is going to be in your standard screen, but Frank isn't going to be in your 3D screen. Frank needs to go in and create his own operator login ID with his own preferences. And then does it also have the same with regards to like a master operator? Can a master operator go in there and perhaps say you're my master operator and I want to work in Imperial, but you're the master and you say, no, everything's metric. Can I go in and change that?
You can. So having those 2 operator profiles allows for different operators to have their different preferences.
Yeah. Excellent. So now that I see that you're back, why don't you give us an idea about those last 3 dots, which obviously opens up the help menu. Give us an idea of what happens there, please, Chris.
Yeah, so we're running through this guide, which we'll send out after this presentation, but for the operator in the cab, if they want to learn a bit more in depth of any of these features, or, hey, if I'm making a setting change, what exactly will that do? Within here, we have a help menu. So if I look at something like using design mode, so if I click on this one here, this will load up the help menu for that item. So it'll give you a really detailed view of what you're going to change, some of the best practices, different file formats, and this is on every item that we have. So just by closing that off, gets us back to that main menu. The other one I'll point out in here for each is we have a system snapshot. So what that means, if you're ever on a job site and you're going, hey, I think this is just dropping out of GNSS accuracy a little bit too often for my liking. I think I've got the base station settings correct. Taking this system snapshot helps your dealer diagnose what that issue might be. Normally it's something like your radio settings and the settings on your machine are a little bit different. You might be having some issues there. This takes that snapshot to help you troubleshoot what that issue might be.
Fantastic. So, okay, let's use an example. Say, what can we use as an example here? What can we use? Okay, so let's say I've gone to a new job site.
Yes.
How do I connect to the local base station and load in a design? Why don't we run through that?
Perfect. So by hitting on that little shovel icon for each, that'll take me back to that machine setup page. And I'm just going to, again, select on that machine setup and then come in. So if this is a job site that's got 3D, I'm going to get into that positioning source, make sure I've got that dual GNSS selected. So I do, and that means that we've enabled those receivers and antennas. They're looking for a correction source. The next bit is the correction source here. And this is where you could either go in and edit or choose from an existing radio setting. We're not going to go into that page today, but you might like to talk about for each some of the things that we can change in there in this current radio setting.
Fantastic. So what about, how do we know if any of these parameters are not where they're supposed to be?
All right. So once we do have that correction source selected, what we like to do is go into the system status again, and we look at that left-hand receiver. So that left-hand receiver, it's the one that's talking to that RTK correction source. So quickly go through here. So the first one's just the model. What type of receiver do you have on your machine? Next one's the firmware. We always like to run the latest firmware. Each sort of software update that we get when there's new receiver firmware, that helps us pick up different satellite constellations, and it's always sort of fine-tuning that correction source that we can get. Very important when you're running off various makes of base stations. But the most important one we want to see here for each is this RTK mode. So we want to ensure that we have an RTK mode and we've got very good vertical and horizontal precision. So looking at this machine right now, we've got a vertical of about 2 centimeters or 20 millimeters and about 10 millimeters for horizontal, which is really good. The next one we come down to is the satellite count. And you can see up to over 30 satellites in some parts of the country, different times of the day, but we need above 8. If you're seeing under 8, you're going to get patchy satellite count, and that's going to equate to sort of poor performance out of your machine accuracy. The next one here is this integrity. So this integrity is basically looking at the link between your machine and the base station radio, going, in the last 3 minutes, how many of those messages came through and were processed effectively? So again, if we're looking at UHF, like we have here on this machine, we want to see that number above 90%. If we're using the internet, we can accept a little bit lower. So if we're using an internet base station or a VRS network, then we'd like to see that above 80%. Again, with the latency, we want to see that above, anything above 1.5 seconds, we're starting to go, hey, let's start troubleshooting that base station. But 1.5 seconds for VRS is okay, but we really need to see that latency, under that 1.5 seconds, and then we're good to go.
Excellent. So I should mention here that we are on a computer simulator, which has defaulted us to a UHF version in the US. And for those that are unaware, obviously in Australia and New Zealand, we work off 450 megahertz, but this US one is at 900 megahertz. So don't get confused there. I just want to repeat, standard from factory, Caterpillar has a cellular product link that supports cellular correction. In other words, IBSS, internet base station, and VRS, so your virtual reference station. Having said that, Chris, if you have any issues on site, it's fair to say, go to your surveyor, right?
Yeah, and then get your surveyor working with the cat dealer to go, hey, let's go through those radio settings. Let's make sure that everything's set correctly, and then you'll be up and racing.
I just don't know the surveyor. Is he happier or is he less happy than the cranky foreman? Because I've dealt with a lot of cranky foremen in the past.
He likes to see this machine digging for each, so we might get back in that work screen and start checking a few things there.
The work screen that's working.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I see that we've got all the parameters in place. So let's load a design, Chris.
Okay. So once we've got a good correction source, the first thing we like to do is make sure that we have the correct project selected. So the file structure within CAT grade is you have a project, you can operate in different modes, and then you can have multiple designs to that project. So if you're doing a large highway job, there'd be multiple sections and multiple designs per section. So you might be doing an overpass like we are here. There might be the culverts, then there might be the finished surface design. So one, knowing you're on the right project, two, coming down and making sure you're on that latest design. You'll see that little V at the end for each. That V represents version. So we're on version 1. Probably by the end of the job, you might see version 1 or 2 or 3, depending on how many iterations are made, but making sure you're on that right project. So we'll get started with this overpass design and load into that next screen.
So with that design, it's fair to say that if it's been put in via USB, we want to make sure that it's in the correct file format. And there is ways to convert designs, which we'll be going through in future sessions. Is there other ways that we can import a design other than USB, Chris?
There is. So one thing we mentioned earlier was the connected community, or having a subscription to a Trimble Works Manager or Trimble Connected Community. That enables the design file and the data from the machine to go 2 ways between machine and office. So if you've got a big job and there's multiple design iterations and you want to make sure everyone is up to date at all times, having that system really sort of saves a lot of time for the surveyor running around with the USB updating machine files.
Fantastic. And there is a subscription required for the Trimble Connected Community. So please don't hesitate to contact your local dealer or SciTech for that. So design's loaded.
Yes.
Let's start making some money, mate. Let's go to work. How do we do that? Let's go straight to work.
Well, first thing first for each, and this is one thing we really strongly recommend, is before you go digging too far to keep that cranky foreman off your back, is go check this machine on a known survey point. So when the job's done, there's a control point there that's going to have a northing, easting elevation value. And again, using that text ribbon we just set up, we could go across looking at the elevation and the easting. So this verifies quite a few things. So by putting that machine on that known survey point, it determines whether you've got an accurate machine, a good bucket measure up, and the site calibration is going to be okay. So first thing you do before you go to work, if the machine's near the go line or you've just come onto a new job, make sure you verify that machine on a known survey point.
So we're checking for your accuracy is what you're saying?
Correct. And there's a couple of different ways to do that for each. So I'll just change that focus view that we have there.
Right. Go ahead and change it, which I know where it is, right down the bottom there.
Yeah, so within the system, we can change the focus point, which is an easy and nice to use feature. You can see this little red dot that we have in the center of the bucket there. That is where we're getting these values from. So if I change this from left to right, that's going to change those northing and easting and elevation values. So again, when you're checking that to make sure that you're getting that right point, make sure you've got the focus point selected on the right side of the bucket that you're actually putting on the control point there for each.
Fantastic. So it's fair to say that if you're using a tilt hitch, that's where you would need to change that focus point, right?
Yeah,
so,
again, and that's a good way to check the bucket accuracy on a tilt hitch. So we'd put it on the on the left-hand side, swap across to the left hand or the right-hand side, double check both sides. That's going to make sure that that is accurate. Being a 3D machine, we like to roll that bucket into 3 different positions on that point, and also tram the machine and reach back if you're on an excavator and make sure that that point's still accurate within a few positions. Once you've done that for each, you can get into the work.
So it's also worth noting that if your bucket doesn't pass that test, we need to first check your wear, so your wear on your GT. Then the other obvious choice is make sure you've selected the right bucket. And if you're convinced that both those are okay, then you're going to need to go back and do another bucket measure up. You're going to need to repeat that process, which I'm sure we all know how to do. So now that we know that the bucket is accurate, I've got that cranky foreman again, Chris. That design, he's just come and told me, great, the design is right, but I want a 300 mil offset.
Yep.
How do we change the offset?
Very easy, and there's a couple of nice tips and tricks I can show you for each. While we come up to this bar, you can see where my mouse is. That just shows you what current design you have loaded. So by pressing and holding that, again, takes you back to that job setup screen. Here we have a horizontal offset, and we can show you this feature later on. But if you've said we've got to dig 300 mil below this current design, just by pressing and holding on that elevation offset there, you'll see here we've got that green line, and if I come in and put a value, again, when I'm on that touch screen in the cab, pressing in here, this will enable a keyboard. It'll pop up, or you can just use the plus and minus values here. So I'm going to go 300. You said go below for each.
Below.
Important thing here is to make sure that I have gone below. So you can see that dotted line is going to be our existing surface design, and we've put an offset above or below. Another nice little feature, if you're constantly changing between, say you're layering sand in a trench, or you have to do different layers, building a road base on a motor grader or a tractor, having that as a simple memory enables you to toggle between those. So we've put an offset in here, and we want to add a new memory here. So we're going to come in and just call this offset 5 or 4. We're going to come into this here. Say we want to make this one below 600. We can save this in here. So now we've got quite a few memories in here for each that enables us back on that home screen to toggle through. So you can see now I've got the minus 600. That's back to 0, or to keep your foreman happy, we're on minus 300. On the screen there, you'll see again that black line. That was our existing surface. We're getting guidance to that green line from that focus point.
Okay, horizontal offset. I'm assuming you can do the same for vertical, right?
Exactly right. So horizontal offset, that's where you can come in and you need to select an alignment. So I'm on a project here. I haven't actually checked on this design if we have an alignment. We've got some round lines here. Might go off this line here if it enables me. So I've got a custom alignment. I've selected that one. And here, say it's a curb and channel on a road, and you're doing the footpath, you want to move it 500 mil to the left or the right, we can come in and change what side of that offset we're going to be. So I might be off that design because it's a little far away from where I am, but that'll give us that guidance for the horizontal offset. That's how you do that for each.
Fantastic, fantastic. Gotta love that PC simulator, Chris. Doing well so far. So why don't we just go through, I'll just go through a little summary here of what Chris has gone through so far. So we've gone through the 4 tiles within the dashboard screen. So that's machine setup, job setup, system status and licenses. We've gone through the menu where you can alter parameters like units, increments, text ribbons that Chris spoke about earlier. In the machine setup tile, you ensure that you're connected to a 3D source. We went through that. We checked for an RTK connection as well after that. You showed us how to load a design via USB, and as well as going through the alternative method through the Trimble connected community. Then we checked for accuracy on both a standard bucket and a tilt hitch bucket, and of course showed us how to alter that focus point. And then we went through offsets. So you showed us a horizontal offset and a vertical offset. So Chris, I feel as though we've only covered off on the basics here. And we are out of time. I do see there's some customers online, and there is a question there that we'll get to in a sec. But why don't you give us an idea of what we are going to go through in future sessions, please? Yeah,
so there's a lot of capability within the system for Leach. So today we've sort of mentioned working off a design from a project. Really handy feature we have in here is building your own design. So whether that's just a simple flat pad or a bit of a complex trench that needs to go around some utilities on the job site to drain some water off, in-field designs is a really powerful tool. One thing I'd just like to add, we've got a lot of help information within the system here. So hitting this little I button will give you an idea of what setting you're going to change. So if you're going, hey, I'm about to change a setting on this machine, you want to find out a bit more information, hitting that I will give you an expansion of a basic information of what that setting is. When you hit see more, that'll come out here to give you more detail. So here we're looking at precision tolerance, and it's talking about basically filtering that band of what you're accepting as accuracy from your correction source. Another one here for each before I close this menu is you'll notice that we have like a grey colour and a blue colour on some of these buttons. To make it intuitive for operators to get comfortable, when you see the blue button, that's the most intuitive and logical step that we've said, hey, 80, 90% of the time, that's the button you want to press. So we've made a change here to go from medium to fine. Then we hit save. Giving that blue button is the correct path to take.
Fantastic. I should mention we are about to unmute the phone. So if we do find that we are still on hold with one of the people that have logged in, then we will put it back on mute. If you do have questions, either please ask us or just type, which is next to the icon down the bottom. You'll see a little caption to type something there. Hopefully you've seen that if you want to ask us a question. So Chris, can I get you to just unmute the phone? Let's see if we've still got that sound coming through.
Yep.
Let's just check that out.
We should be okay now, Felice.
Just mute all. I think you just got to unmute. So muting.
Yep. So you might be able to get some feedback coming through. If someone unmutes themselves, they'll be able to
if you want
ask a question there.
Yeah. Excellent. So I do have a question that gets asked all the time, and that is, how do I know what software version I have, Chris, and how can I see that on the screen? Are you able to just quickly run through that?
Yep, sure, Felice. So again, coming back up to that cat grade icon takes us back to that default view. If I come in here to system status, coming down to the system ECM. So this system ECM is what we call the EC520, or it's the main brain box of this cat grade control system. So by clicking that there, it will show here the current firmware, which is version 2. Again, released at ConExpo. That is the latest version. So if you get to your machine after this and go, hey, I'm seeing I've got 1.8 or something a little bit older, reach out to your cat dealer and they can provide that software or work with you to get that updated on your machine. So good question.
Question that's come in online is, say I'm digging out a basement and and you're really checking for your accuracy and the machine's in the way. Is there a way we can make the machine invisible but perhaps still have the bucket there?
Yes. So another feature we have in here, so we're doing a bit of a roundabout here on this road project. But if I was doing a trench or boxing on this part of the road, if I wanted to remove that machine so I had a better view of just the bucket, if I was doing some fine work, coming up and pressing here, I can actually come in and turn the machine off, or I could just turn the attachment off and make that transparent. So if you're finding getting guidance is great, but the machine picture on the screen is getting in the way of things, you can come in here, turn that off, and you'll just be looking at the bucket.
Perfect. Another one that's come through, Chris. What if I'm working at night and want to change the screen brightness?
Yeah, so that's a common one for each, especially with a lot of the night works happening on roadways around the country at the moment. So just under the text ribbon here, we've got this dark background. So if I just flick that over to dark background, when I come in, that'll just change that. Some people actually like that setting by default. You see a lot of operators running that all the time. Otherwise, when you're in the machine at night, you're not getting as much glare back in your face. We change the color of that background. While we're just looking at screen views there for each, one other one I'll touch on is depending on what machine type you have and what view that you're comfortable with, we can easily just press and hold and change not only the view, but the type of guidance you're getting. So if you've got a faster moving product like a next gen D6 or a motor grader with cat grade on there, this can give you a very simple cut and fill. So out of the corner of your eye, without looking at the picture, you just get an understanding of whether you're on or off design. Another one, if you're lifting pipes and you want to make sure the machine's nice and stable, you can turn a bubble level on. So even if you're not using the machine for grade control or guidance, there's some handy tools in there to help you with other tasks.
Excellent. Just to repeat, if you did want to ask us a question on the phone, just unmute yourself and please don't hesitate to ask. I do notice that there has been another question that's been typed in here, and that's, Chris, if I'm digging and come across a utility, can I record it so I can come back to it later?
Yes. So In the advanced session we'll do in a week's time, you can see down the bottom here where I've got that bucket focus. Next to that is a feature we call record point. So if I record that point there, if I press it quickly, it'll just point the point on the ground. But if I actually press and hold, I can come in and name it. So in that example from that question, if I was digging and I found an old telecom wire, or if it was asbestos or something that you knew that was going to get covered over and you had to come back to, or you wanted to make an alert for the office, you've uncovered something, you can actually come in here and name that. So if I call it telecom, you can put that under a work order so we know where to go find it. We hit save, and if we zoom in on that dot there, that'll actually give us that name. Again, if you're using that connected community, that will come back to the office. So the guys will be able to zoom in and go, okay, we know where that is.
Fantastic, fantastic. That's pretty much it for the question. So I want to thank you for your time today, Chris. That was a great initiative there, a great input. I'm glad that the 3D simulator came up for us then. I do want to add that the 3D reference guide that this whole session has been based on is available to you, the customer. So please don't hesitate to reach out to your local dealer person and ask for a copy of that. It's great for your operators that are getting into a next-gen excavator and working 3D for the first time. You know, sometimes they're unsure about things, and this reference guide is great. It's got some fantastic tips and hints. Again, that 3D reference guide is available to you, the customer. So once again, thanks for joining us, Chris. Thank you.
Yep, thanks for each. And I think, yeah, anyone on the phone that go, hey, I want to learn a little bit more about some of these advanced features. Again, we'll cover off things like lane guidance, infield designs, some of the mapping features. There's a really lot of powerful tools in here. A lot of customers get the machine, get the system, use it on a big project, but even in jobs where you come to, you might be the first machine on the site. You can build a design, away you go.
So again, when I see that there's at least half a dozen customers, we thank you for dialing in, especially during your workday. We really appreciate it. And please note that this has been recorded. If you do think that this is going to provide value for you or for your operators that are perhaps novices with 3D, again, reach out to your dealer guy who will have access to be able to get the recorded version of this. And you can, perhaps it's a great initiative for you as a business owner or machine owner to get in and run this recording as an example, run this recording so they can just sit through this as part of their initiation before they actually get in the machine and start working. I'll just check. I think we've got a message through there. And yeah, thanks for providing one of the person that has responded saying thanks.
Okay.
I appreciate it. I won't name names whilst we're on a live recording. So thank you for that message that just came through. So with that, we're going to end it. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for dialing in. There is going to be an advanced session. Please don't hesitate to reach out to your dealer people if you have any information or further stuff that you need. Once again, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Fletch. Thank you, everyone.